And look, I think if there's an independent neurologist looking and treating concussions, I think that would be the best option moving forward, because they haven't got ties to, the business, the rugby club, or the player as such. They're looking out for the best welfare of that individual, and that's the best way, because they're not influenced by the club or anyone else. So yeah, I'd like to see that, and I think once that sort of gets in line, the whole impact surrounding concussion and awareness in contact sport, I think those protocols and all that will evolve over time. Now they're just talking about it, and they're sort of getting it sort of close to where they want to, but they really need to understand that concussions aren't going to just go away. They're always going to happen. But what we want, well, what I'd like to see done is actually have them, taken very, very seriously and dealt with accordingly. And each individual needs to be brutally honest with themselves, because coming back too early is only going to leave you at more risk of getting, another concussion. So in that time, I just really think, rugby and all contact sports will be in a better position to move forward, and more parents will be able to send their kids into schools playing rugby league, rugby union, all that. So yeah, it's a waiting game, really.
In regards to that, Michael, sorry, would you think this education should start? So I'm a rugby player, I'm 13 years of age in first year of school. Should I be getting told about concussion then? Or is it when I become a pro rugby player? Should my coaches know when I'm 13 the dangers? Or is it pro? Where should this education start to get it to the top level? What do you think?
In terms of the players being told, about concussion, look, it may or may not scare them, and not play that they want to and make them not play the way that they want to play. So you've got to be really, really careful on how you deliver that message at, a year 7, year 8, year 9 sort of an age. I think the older you get in that school time period, I think by that stage you're pretty aware on how physical and how confronting the game can be, and the way that you manage yourself is a relationship that you have with your parents, yourself, and the coach at the time. But also, again, you've got to have an independent neurologist there. You need someone there to look at, the full contact game, and literally just citing concussions, potential concussions, and just managing those players after it happens. So that's the one thing that we can't control. We just can't control. It's never going to happen. People are always going to be concussed in contact sports. We just want the management of those individuals to be taken very, very seriously.
Do you think that World Rugby has done enough since when transitioning into improving the game, since when you played or to now? How do you think the game has changed since then?
They've definitely come on leaps and bounds, I think. I think World Rugby have done a great job alongside, the NRL, rugby league here in Australia, the AFL, things like that, the Gaelic football, all that. I think the protocols in all those contact sports are becoming a lot better. In terms of players coming back on the field during the match after a concussion, look, I still see it. I still see it happening. I still see cover-ups happening, particularly a lot of games here in Australia. I see the rugby league players here. They're just continuously getting concussed and then coming back on because they've managed to beat the system and wave the coach or the medical staff and just want to be back on the field. And you got to think from a player's perspective, just say, right, I can kind of get it, because all I want to do is, I've got all these aspirations to be the best that I can, and I don't want to miss the opportunity, and there's pressure in myself wanting to get back out there on the field. I think from that perspective, it really needs to be taken out of the players' hands, It really needs to have someone just to say, look, mate, you're not right. You know you're not right. Let's just stay off the field. And if we can get that message throughout all the grassroots rugby to school level, the future of the games would be a lot better. But in terms of the time when I was playing, no one wasn't even talked about. Concussion never came up into the same sentence. It was only in my later years that it really, really sort of started to become an issue. However, World Rugby still weren't doing anything about it at that stage. But I think over the last 3 years, it's become a lot better than what it was.
So obviously, yeah, you were there at that time. You were on the field going through. So I guess none of that would have probably, you weren't thinking about it when you might have got a knock on the head and you kind of would have been thinking, okay, I want to get back on the pitch and prove myself, essentially.
Yeah, most of the time when I got knocked out, I was like really knocked out. So I sort of was in a daze. So I knew I wasn't going back on. It was just myself, and the next day, just managing yourself, managing the time that you return to any sort of physical training. Started with walking and running, and then it just went from there. But yeah, in terms of getting back on the field, it was just no option for me. I was never going back on, which was great because, everything was sort of, I couldn't let it happen,
And you're on about managing your body, managing your time here after the concussion. Obviously, rugby players these days play a lot of games. You're seeing like Leinster, I think, played, was it 35 games last year? And then Ireland, obviously, the internationals on top of that. Do you think there's too many games being played these days in Northern Hemisphere rugby specifically?
There's way too many games. Way too many games. And look, the Super 15 down in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Argentina, look, they play 15 games and then the finals. So you're probably looking at a maximum of 18, 19, 20 games. The training that they do is pretty full on. There's a high intensity training throughout that period because it's such a small competition. But there, up in the Northern Hemisphere, my God, the amount of games that they have is just astronomical. There's too many competitions. I think there's like 3 or 4 running at a time. I think it's the Aviva, is it the Aviva Premiership now?
It's the Gallagher Premiership now.
Right, it's the Gallagher Premiership now. And then, you've got the
European Champions Cup.
Yeah, you got all that. And they've probably got something else. But it can equate to things like 38, 32, 36 games, plus your international games, plus traveling. Like it's sometimes a little bit too much. Actually, it's not. It is too much. It's way too much.
So as someone who's played in both hemispheres, do you believe that in the Northern Hemisphere, if they played everyone once, home or away, and then had the European Cup on top of it, would the product we'd watch on the pitch be better?
It might be better in terms of you get to watch them a little bit more, but in terms of the exciting rugby, if they played each other less, you'd see a lot more exciting rugby, and they had less games. Obviously, if you said to me, right, I've got 25 games this year, and then you got your international duties after that, you're like happy days. Like that's a great medium. You can run potentially, the Gallagher Premiership and the European Cup. If you don't qualify for it, you get that week off. I just think those competitions are the 2 main competitions, along with the top 14 in France, and obviously in Italy and whatnot around Europe. But having those main competitions in the relative countries, and then international duty, that would be really, really exciting, because trying to play 35 games plus international is just way too much. Like you hardly have time off, and your body just can't repair.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think in like the URC now, for example, there's 16 teams. I believe every team should play 15 games. So your draw is your draw, and then maybe quarters, semis, finals. Because then you're going to see Johnny Sexton in the 18 matches. It won't be Sexton plays 10 and Ross Byrne plays 10. Leinster would be full team out every week. Or Munster wouldn't be resting Peter O'Mahony, Conor Murray. They'd have to play him. I think it'll definitely make an impact for the positive, in a positive way on that league. But also something we didn't address. So when we're talking about the concussion debate, and you mentioned teams in South Africa. So obviously the South African teams now would have to be traveling to Europe every second week nearly. So if I took a subconcussive hit and then had to get an airplane for 10 hours, how do you think that would affect my body?
Well, I'm not too sure. I don't think I've been in that position. It's probably a question for a neurologist to answer. But look, I certainly don't think it would be any benefit or positive for you. I'm not a neurologist, can't really comment physically, but just as an outsider looking at that, do I really want to get on a flight for 10 hours after receiving a huge concussion? It's probably not. You probably just want to lie down and go to bed. But yeah, that's probably, I'm not really at liberty to answer that.
Yeah, I just think it just sounds weird even going on a big, huge flight straight after a rugby match. It just can't be good for your body.
No. Well, has someone been in that position?
Well, there was speculation during the week that some South African players and coaches were getting affected by the amount of travel time that they do. Because obviously they're going from Cape Town, Pretoria, Johannesburg, all the way up to, we'd say, Limerick or Newport. So they wouldn't be direct flights. You're flying from South Africa to Dubai or Qatar into the UK and then to Ireland, or getting a bus to Wales. It's a lot of traveling. There's not enough downtime.
Well, it fatigues you. Traveling without doing anything, just sitting on the plane, just fatigues you. You watch a couple of movies on the flight, you might have a sleep here and there, but all that travel, it's like, I've done it for so many years, and you always just get so tired. You got to adapt to the new climate. You got to adapt to getting your body moving after being stationary for 10 odd hours, 10, 12 hours. So of course it's going to have an impact on your physical well-being. In terms of the mentality side of things, it's going to make you that little bit more tired as well. That's just normal physiology. But the South Africans definitely have a point, 100%.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to be doing that. No way.
And they also play a very physical game of rugby, the South Africans there.
Yeah, no, they're a wild card for this World Cup. It's going to be very, very exciting. I mean, you got France, probably Lions at home, and not the best away, but Ireland's up there. Yeah, I know we've mentioned it previously.
Yeah.